One of the key elements to a good flow for your track in Psytrance is automations. Today I want to have a look at one of my projects and I want to show you all of the automations to just give you an idea of how many there are. And then I'm also going to talk about some of the tricks that I like to use to actually make sure that my automations work and some of the parameters that I frequently automate to build some tension in my tracks. So this is a little bit of a special project. For one, as you can see, I have laid out all of the different automations and all of the different sounds so that we can scroll through it. This was just a quick scroll, but we'll look into it more in a little bit. The second reason why this project is interesting is because it's a track that I normally don't really write. It's a little bit darker and it's a little bit more complex than the music that I normally write. The reason for that is I wrote this track for a YouTube video that is going to come out either soon or has already come out. I don't know yet. I still need to film it because I do need to work on some of the details of this track. But just to give you a little bit of a sneak preview, this is what it sounds like. So you can hear some very complex sound design and some very complex things going on. So I hope you guys will enjoy the full breakdown once it comes out, if it hasn't already. Now for the automations, let's just quickly scroll through the project and you can see the quantity of automations. For some of them, I should have closed this, but for some of the sounds, there aren't actually any automations. So I'm just closing up the track. So all of the things that you see are things that are being automated, of course. Here in the drums, you'll see that some of the minor drums that I'm using, mainly the fills, there aren't any automations, as you would expect. But also my bass line is nice and automated. When it comes to the sequences, there's a lot of things going on, as you can probably imagine. This is the acid line, so this is one of the main elements, so this is going to have the most automations. Here's another one. This is all of the glitchy stuff that I'm doing, this kind of stuff here. Now, a lot of the glitchiness doesn't come from those automations. It's mainly filter cutoffs being automated here. Some of them are to actually introduce the sounds, but other here are to just change the tone of the sound over time. And then I have very specific cases where for example, this part here, I just need to have it go up and down real quick to just get a little bit of an extra swoop out of it. As opposed to just this. So some of the automations that you'll see today are very specific, whereas others are just generally used to either introduce some element or to change it over time. As you can see with this one here, it's just kind of waving up and down. Then when it comes to the one-shots, there's really two types of automations. One, again, is to just change the tonality of the sound, something like this here. Where this automation is just used to control the actual sound design itself, the peak of the sound itself. If I turn it off, then you get something like that. And now you have this. But then there's the other things, like for example, what is happening with this delay tail for this sound here, where we're just upping the delay tail over time, for example. You can hear that it gives that nice kind of ringing effect where it's ringing up in frequency. And this is of course being done with the frequency shifter here. Now one of the other things that you'll notice in particular about this sound is that I'm turning off the dry wet for this echo here. So this is the delay effect that I'm using. And you'll actually see that all the time. Here's another example where the sound will just play for a little bit and then I'll just turn off its delay. The sound will play for a little bit and then I'll turn off its delay. This is actually done at a very precise point, where, for example, I want to introduce another element or I need the space for something like a fill in this case. You can see right here from the kick structure that this is where the track actually stops for a little bit. And you'll hear how all of the energy is kind of building up to that one point, and then right here it just closes and you lack a lot of the delay tails and stuff like that. What this allows you to do is it just gives you a lot more space to work with. And you can see even here for this synth, I'm using the delay on the synth itself and then it immediately cuts out so that I have more space for this fill part that is over here. I'm sorry for the long amount of scrolling. As you can imagine, with all of the automations open, it is a little bit hard to scroll up and down. Obviously, I don't usually work on the project like this. I just have all of the automations open for the video. Now, before we continue, I do quickly want to say that if you want to support this channel, you can do so by making sure that you're subscribed and that you like the video. Also, if you want to support me financially, you can check out my products on Gumroad, including my recently released preset pack, as well as supporting me on Patreon, where you get early access to videos and many more benefits. With that being said, let's get back into the video. Now, when it comes to the main parameters that I like to automate, there's a few ones here that just show it really, really well. As you can see here, we have a filter high pass going up. You can see that down below as well. So this is frequency 1. Which corresponds to this high pass right here. We have the wavetable position here for Serum, as well as the filter cutoff and the filter drive here. These are all meant for tonality changes. So in essence, the sound is just changing over time, the actual sound itself. We're not introducing an effect, we're not introducing something new, something layered on top of it. It's actually the sound kind of morphing and changing. And obviously this is part of the sound design, the patch, as opposed to the effects that you put on top of the patch. Generally speaking, I like to divide my sound design up into 2 phases, in the sense that I create the sound in Serum, whatever I want for the sound, and then I go into the effects, and that's where I kind of fix and add effects on top of the sound. That's where I'm no longer in the sound design process specifically, unless I'm doing something really complex or something really glitchy or something like that. Then there might be like sound design things that you're doing in the effects. But generally speaking, once I'm out of the synth, it becomes effect work. It becomes additions to what we already have. So those additions might be, as I said, a high pass that is slowly increasing. We have this delay over here, which is slowly increasing and then just stops again, something that we've seen before. Over here is another great example of that, where we are using both sound design automations as well as effect automations, in the sense that here the filter cutoff is opening up on this Serum patch here, as well as the dry wet for this echo. And this is just used as an atmosphere. Now you'll also hear that I'm playing differently with the different patches, especially when you have 2 patches like this, where it's the same sound very close together. One of the interesting things to do is to just have a variation between them, even if it's a background sound, like in this case this atmosphere really is. Here's another great example of a very cool atmosphere that they created for this track. You can hear towards the end there, we're doing some crazy stuff with the pitch bend, where it's actually bending down 2 octaves to the point where it no longer becomes a tone and it kind of becomes like a squelchy, screechy kind of thing. The way that this works is that this particular waveform, when it's pitched down like that, and it's 2 octaves below this register of the sub bass, it just becomes this kind of clicky or plucky sound, I guess. So we're using that idea first of all by just opening up over a long period of time. And then towards the end here, where something like a fill is happening, what we want to do is we want to just go down here, and then with the effects on top of it, we're doing a lot more. We're making it a lot more interesting. I guess the best place to actually see that is for the place where I designed the sound for. Obviously, once I designed the sound, I copied it over a couple of times, but I originally designed this sound right here. And what you'll hear is that we're given some liberty to do something cool with the sound here, in that the kick and bass is moving away, some of the drums are moving away, some of the sequences are moving away. So we have a lot more space here, and therefore I can do more with the automation. Now I just closed out of all of the automations so that I can give you an overview of what we're actually doing. Usually when it comes to your Psytrance track, it's going to be structured in a way that you have a certain part of the drop and then there will be a fill. You have another certain part of the drop and there will be something like a build-up and then a fill. You have a certain part of the drop and then it has another end to it. That's essentially what we're doing here. The different build-ups, fill lengths, different types of build-ups. Here you can see a very long drop section with a longer fill after that. So this is in essence just two drop sections combined together with the fill after that. What in essence is happening, we're creating these blocks. And when it comes to the tension and all of the automation, what you're usually trying to do is you're trying to do something like this. I'm going to show it right here with a utility. Say that this is our automation. What we're trying to do is probably something that looks like this, where in terms of the tension, we want to go down from the start and then rise back up into the next part. But that tends to be a little bit boring. So what usually becomes the case after a while is if you really want something high energy, in this case, this drop is actually 3 segments. As you can see, it's 24 bars here. So we would have maybe something like this, where, okay, we're going to rise up a little bit in tension. And then we're going to go down again here, maybe to a little bit of higher point. And then maybe either we're just going to go all the way up from this point, something like this, or we do something like this, where, again, we have this little rise in tension. Here, for example, there is the crash, which helps going down again because it's kind of like a splash. But maybe some of the automations might work like this as well, or some of the synth modulations that you're doing. Here's a great synth example where we have this 4-bar up and down triangle that is just controlling the filter cutoff, so it increases and then decreases the high frequencies again. So in essence, this is just rising in tension and then lowering in tension over 2 bars again, and it's just repeating that over and over again. But in essence, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this kind of flow, this kind of difference in energy level over time. And really, when you look at it from a drops perspective, it's not this big, right? So you would probably have this be very close together in terms of like its relative energy level. And then say that you go in here, the fill is really where we're building up the energy level from a lower part here. So this is very low because there's minimal drums, there's just a few one-shots, some minimal sequences, and then really we're building it up here to something that is much higher. And really, when it comes to automations, you're not trying to do it with one thing. You're trying to do it with many different elements and many different automations as well. I mentioned before that I like to change the sound tonally, like in the sound design itself. I like to sometimes have a high pass filter or a low pass filter introducing the element or taking some of the lower frequencies away from the element. Another good one is to increase the dry wet of the delay over time, which I've also shown. Can also do the same thing with a reverb. And those would be the main parameters that I would automate, but for specific sounds, there might be certain effects or certain things that you want to introduce as well. Like say for this acid line that we saw in the beginning, there's a lot of glitchy stuff happening on top of it too. And this is one of the things that I would like to highlight as well, is that you can just turn on and off different effects in automations as well. What this essentially does is it doesn't contribute to the flow, it just makes the sound a little bit more interesting over time. Here's another example that doesn't really contribute to the flow. You can see we're not really kind of like flowing up and down anymore for this sound. In this particular part of the track, the flow is mostly provided by the atmospheres that are in here and some of the other elements, as opposed to the main acid line in here. Where before, in the part where it's part of the build-up, it is really contributing to the flow. It's just kind of going up in terms of its filter cutoff. It's going up in terms of its pitch here. This is a pitch bend modulation. Here we have the low frequency going up. We have the high frequency opening up slightly. This actually turns down slightly to 7K here. We have the dry wet, which I talked about before, going up. We just have an overall change in gain here, I believe. At least there might have been a change in gain at some point, but as you can see right now it's removed. But obviously, as you can imagine, increasing the volume over time is another great way to introduce an element or bring more energy to an element. Another parameter that I want to highlight here is the spread from M stereo spread here. This is just increasing the stereo width over time. So essentially what we're doing here in the build-up, it is mediumly wide in around like 58% here, as you can see. And it just goes up to 100%, or at least almost 100% here. And then at the point where the build stops and we go into the fill, it actually snaps down, becomes more mono, and then it increases again back to that medium range that we were at before. So you get this cool effect of the sound becoming really, really wide, and then the build stops and it kind of snaps back to the middle, and then it opens up again. So you get this kind of two-stage opening up kind of thing, where in the build-up it is opening up, and then in the fill as well, it is opening up again. So these are just some of the automation tips that I wanted to go through. If you want to learn a lot more about tension and stuff like that in Psytrance, then I have a special video series on that. I talk about things like the energy level, transitions, fills, that kind of stuff, and how you can use them and incorporate them into your Psytrance tracks. So if you need more information on this topic, make sure to check out those videos. But that's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.